The World Cup is only a few months away, and with that being said, in this month we see a lot of these World Cup teams play in their final matches before the actual tournament. We are seeing loads and loads of friendlies for the upcoming World Cup, and this is pretty much the last time we're going to see these countries play before the actual tournament. So in today's video, I'm going to be telling you guys my top 10 must-watch games in these upcoming friendlies to determine whether or not these teams will have a good World Cup or whether or not they may underachieve. I'm not going to be going in any particular order. I'm just going to give you guys my top 10 games that you need to watch so you can see whether or not these teams are going to have a good World Cup or a bad World Cup. So starting off with the first must-watch game, which is being taken place this Thursday, it is Brazil against France. And in my opinion, this is probably the craziest game in these friendlies. I think both of these teams have a real good chance to make it exceptionally far in the World Cup. Obviously, Brazil is ranked in 5th by FIFA and France is ranked in 3rd. And for me, this is definitely the most hyped up game in these friendlies. And I think this is going to be very interesting. Now, obviously, Brazil do have some injuries come into this game. If you look at players like Rodrigo, he is injured, but he will also be injured for the World Cup, sadly. But even players like Bruno Guimaraes and also possibly Eder Militao might miss this game. Now, for me, I think these are two very important players for Brazil. Bruno Guimaraes is having a great season with Newcastle, and he will definitely be a really important player for their midfield. And obviously, Eder Militao playing in that back line, partnered beside Gabriel, I think that's a top center back partnership. So not having them two in this game will definitely hinder Brazil. But I think this is really important to see where Carlo Ancelotti is at and what his team looks like. Because if you look at Brazil in recent matches, they actually haven't been very good. If you look at them in recent friendlies, yes, they got a great win over South Korea, but then we saw them lose against Japan, and they also recently drew 1-1 against Tunisia. Now, obviously, in a lot of these games, Ancelotti is trying many different squads because obviously he's a new manager and he wants to see what his best squad is. But I feel like in this game against France, he needs to play the best squad. He needs to play the squad that he thinks will be starting in the World Cup. Whether that's with Vinicius Jr., whether that's with João Pedro in the attack, whatever his defensive players are, he needs to pick his proper team. And as for France, I think they're definitely the favorite in this game. France are looking really good. They're on great form. We saw them score many goals in the qualifiers and in recent games. Obviously, you look at their goals. 4 goals against Ukraine, 3 against Azerbaijan. They're scoring loads of goals and they haven't lost a game in 7 matches. So I do feel like France are definitely the favorite in this match. But I think this tells you a lot about the upcoming World Cup. This one game will tell us, in my opinion, whether or not these teams will have good World Cup performances or whether they may not be at the level that we think they're at. Moving on to the next game, which is also being taken place on Thursday, we have Colombia against Croatia. Now, like I said, these top 10 games are in no particular order. I just think these are 10 of the games that you must watch, and these teams are going to be very important and crucial teams in the World Cup. Now, if you look at Colombia, they're a really good team and they're on really good form. Obviously, in the CONMEBOL qualifiers, I'm pretty sure they finished in 3rd place with 7 wins, 7 draws, and 4 losses. And they were a good team. They scored the 2nd most amount of goals. They're a very good team in the attack with players like Luis Diaz. Obviously, they have the Colombian Luis Suarez, who I'm a big fan. Luis Suarez this season with Sporting has been absolutely incredible. In my opinion, he's probably one of the most informed strikers in the world. This season with Sporting, he's gotten 23 goals and 4 assists in 24 matches. He's crazy. He's on fire. So with that being said, Colombia do have a very good attacking squad. And if you look at Croatia, I feel like this is also a very important game for them. Now, obviously, Gvardiol is currently injured, and I think he's probably one of their most important players. And it looks like he may be back for the World Cup, but it's going to be very close. But even Croatia in the qualifiers, they were very good. Obviously, they finished in 1st place. They qualified directly to the World Cup, and they haven't lost in a pretty good amount of matches. But I think this game will tell us a lot about both Croatia and Colombia, whether or not Croatia can still survive without Gvardiol, and whether or not Colombia can score the same amount of goals that they did against the South American teams, but now against the European teams. Because obviously in the World Cup, they're going to have Portugal in their group and they're going to need to score the goals. So I think this is a really important game. Moving on to the next match, we have England against Uruguay. This match is taking place on Friday. And I think this is a really important match for England, but also for Uruguay, because I feel like with Uruguay, obviously they're going to be missing Bentancur in this game. But in terms of their manager, Bielsa, it seems like they're going to stick with him for the World Cup. I'm personally not a big fan of him. I don't think he gets his team to play the best football. And I feel like Uruguay, they have decent players. But if you look at recent results, they haven't been good enough. We saw them draw against Mexico. They drew against Chile. And in their last match, they got smoked 5-1 against the USA. That is not good enough for Uruguay. So if they can get a decent result against England in this match, if they can get a draw, then I feel like that's definitely something positive to look forward to for the World Cup. But at this current moment, I think England could score 2, 3, maybe even 4 goals against this Uruguayan team. But if you look at England, I think this is also important to them because in the qualifiers, yes, they were playing a few decent teams, but personally, I didn't think they performed the best in some of their games. Obviously, we see, 5-0 against Latvia, 5-0 against Serbia. So they can score the goals. But in some of their games, they were a little bit inconsistent. If you remember their game against Andorra, I think it was, that was a pretty poor game from them. I'm pretty sure it ended in a 1-0. Yeah, right here. Ended in a 1-0 win. And then right after, we saw them lose 3-1, against Senegal at home, which was also another poor result. So yes, England can score the goals, but I feel like they still haven't proved that they can be consistent enough against better and more historic teams. So against Uruguay, if this is a close game, it's definitely bad news for England. But if they can score multiple goals, then I think coming into this World Cup, they'll still be one of the favorites for sure. Moving on to the next match, we have Netherlands against Norway, another match taking place on Friday. And for me, I think I may be the most excited for this game. I think this is going to be a very, very entertaining game. Obviously, Netherlands ranked 7th by FIFA, Norway ranked 32nd. But realistically, I think Norway are definitely a top 15, maybe even a top 12 team. I think they're a really, really good team. And in this match, Norway are coming into this match on red hot scoring form. They scored 4 against Italy, 4 against Estonia. That draw in that friendly against New Zealand was poor. 5 against Israel, 11 against Moldova. We all know that Norway have one of the best attacks in Europe. It's not new news. We all know that Norway have one of the best attacks. They have Haaland, they have Sorloth, they have Antonio Nusa, Oscar Bob in the midfield. They have Odegaard, they have Patrick Berg, Sander Berg. They have some really, really good players. Now, Netherlands do have some injuries in this match. Matthijs de Ligt will not be there. Frankie de Jong is currently suffering from a little injury. Obviously, Jurrien Timber picked up a knock. I think he probably will play, but it's not going to be the best Netherlands team. And also, Netherlands, some of their players, I don't think have been performing that good this season. If you look at Dumfries, he's been injured a lot for Inter Milan. You look at a player like Van Dijk, and he hasn't looked as good as he looked in previous years. So I feel like Norway are definitely a team that can beat Netherlands. And I think this will tell us a lot that we need to know about Netherlands and about Norway. If Norway can get a good result in this game against Netherlands, playing in the Netherlands, hey, Norway could finish first in their group. That's all I'm going to say. Moving into the next match, we have Morocco against Ecuador. And this, I feel like, is more of an important match to see how Ecuador perform. Because Morocco, obviously, we saw them at the AFCON. They just got awarded the AFCON, which I think is a little bit scandalous. But we've seen them play a lot more recently. And we've seen them get some very good results as well. Obviously, we saw them beat Nigeria in penalties. We saw them beat Cameroon. They beat Tanzania, Zambia. They got some good results in the AFCON. But if you look at Ecuador are a team that draw almost every single game. They haven't lost in, 15 matches or so? They haven't lost in a long time. But they don't win a lot. They draw so much. If you remember them in the CONMEBOL qualifiers, they drew so many games. It's like they don't even want to score. They finished in second place, which was amazing for them. But they only got 14 goals in 18 games. That's averaging less than 1 goal for every game they play. And they got the most draws out of any other team. Now, defensively, Ecuador are top tier. Their defense is incredible. If you look at their defensive midfielder and Caicedo, obviously in the defense, they have players like Hincapié. They have some really, really good defensive players. And that's definitely their specialty. But they need to score more goals if they want to make it far in this World Cup. So I think this game against Morocco will really test Ecuador to see if they can score against a pretty good defensive team in Morocco, or whether they'll settle for a 0-0 or a 1-1 draw. In my opinion, I'm looking for goals from both of these teams. I need to see how they're both attacking. Obviously, we saw Morocco more recently, but I think Ecuador, we need to see something in the attack from this team. Moving on to the next match, we have USA against Belgium, and this match is being taken place on Saturday. And I think this is an important match because Belgium, I feel like in the qualifiers, they weren't that convincing. We saw them get draws against North Macedonia. We saw them concede many goals against Wales. Here you can see they won 2-4, but they conceded 2 goals. And in the other match against Wales, I think they also conceded another 2 or 3. We saw them here draw against Kazakhstan in that last match in the qualifying. So Belgium are a good team, but defensively, I feel like they have a lot of frailties. And I also feel like they're a very inconsistent team. Now, if you look at the USA, for example, this is also a really important game because if you look at them in recent matches, they've played a lot of friendlies. They beat Uruguay, obviously, like I mentioned earlier, 5-1. We saw them beat Paraguay, they beat Australia. They drew against Ecuador, which was a good result for USA. And they also beat Japan 2-0, which is a very good result. But obviously, I don't think USA can make it that far in the World Cup. But if they can get a result in this game against Belgium, maybe I'll change my mind. Right now, at the current moment, I don't think USA can get past the round of 16. But if they beat Belgium in this game, maybe they can make a sneaky quarterfinal appearance. You never know. Moving on to the next match, which is also being played on Saturday, we have Mexico against Portugal. And obviously, I'm wearing the Mexico kit right now. I like Mexico. I think Mexico are a good team. I don't think they're as good as they've been in previous years, but having the home advantage in this World Cup, I do still think they are a strong team. And if you look at Portugal, they're also a very, very strong team. In my opinion, Portugal are probably one of 3 favorites to win the World Cup. You look at a team like Spain, maybe Argentina, and Portugal. I think those are probably the 3 best teams in the world. And obviously, Portugal, they won the Nations League, and they were very, very good in that competition. Now, I'm not a big fan of their manager, Roberto Martinez, but I think they have a really, really good squad. I think they may have one of the best squads in the world. Now, obviously, in the qualifiers, they got that very poor result against Ireland where they lost 2-0. And that wasn't a good result. And even their 2-2 draw against Hungary is not good enough for them. But we saw in some other games where they can score loads of goals like they did against Armenia. 9-1. That's crazy. So in this game against Mexico, I feel like Portugal are definitely the favorites and they should win this game. And Mexico, sadly, they also do have a few injuries. Edson Alvarez is injured. Gilberto Mora, who I'm a big fan of. I think he's a really, really good up-and-coming youngster born in 2008. He's only like 17 years old. He's a great player, but he may be injured for this game. But if Mexico can get a result in this game, I think that's really, really good for them because earlier on last year, they weren't doing too good. You can see here a few poor results, but in recent friendlies, they've gotten 3 wins back-to-back. So if they can make it a 4th win in this game against Portugal, I think Mexico could definitely have a pretty good World Cup. But this is definitely a game that Portugal need to win to give them that confidence heading into this World Cup. Moving into the 8th game, we have Colombia against France. And this is another game where I'm really excited for. Obviously, we already talked about Colombia. We talked about France. And in this game, this is definitely going to be really, really interesting. Now, France are ranked 3rd in the world, and in the qualifiers, they were incredible. Absolutely phenomenal. But Colombia were also really, really good. And this is definitely going to be more of a test for Colombia, in my opinion, because like I already mentioned in the Colombia against Croatia game, Colombia, they've shown how good they are against the South American teams. But can they do it against the European teams? That's what we need to see. If Colombia can get a result against France, then heading into this World Cup, I think they can make it pretty far. But I think it's going to be very, very tough, especially against a team in France who are very, very solid defensively. Players like Saliba are having a really good season. Upamecano has been great with Bayern Munich. They still have players like N'Golo Kante. They have Tchouameni. They have Camavinga. They have some really, really good players in that spine, the center backs and the central midfielders. And obviously, with Mbappe up top, if Colombia can keep France to only 1 goal, maybe even 2 goals, that'll be very, very impressive for Colombia. And if they can get a draw, that would be very good for them. But in my opinion, I do think France are definitely the favorites in this game, and they probably will win. Moving on to the 9th game, we have Germany against Ghana. And for me, this is just a very interesting game because obviously we didn't see Ghana in the AFCON, so it's been a minute since we've seen Ghana play in actual competitive games. Now, if you look at them in recent friendlies, it doesn't look that good. We saw them have friendlies against Japan and South Korea, and more recently against South Africa, which was right before the AFCON. And they lost all 3 of those games. They conceded 4 goals and they didn't score. So it does seem like Ghana in recent matches, they have struggled to score, and Mohamed Kudus possibly being out for this game is also going to hinder them. So I think Germany in this game should definitely win by a few goals, maybe a 3-1 win, which would be great for Germany. And even in recent games, they've been very good. In the qualifiers, they're really good. They scored a lot of goals. But obviously, Germany in recent matches in other competitions, in the Nations League and the Euros and previous competitions, they have been inconsistent. And they don't want to have a World Cup similar to what they did in 2022, because that World Cup was not good at all for Germany. So coming to this World Cup, if they can get a comfortable win in this game against Ghana, then that would be very good for them. But I'm more excited to see how Ghana play and see whether they're good and whether they should have been in the AFCON, or whether their recent form will continue and they will struggle to score. Moving on to the last game, we have Ivory Coast against Scotland. This game is being taken place on Tuesday. And once again, I think this is another interesting match. We have an African team against a European team, and Scotland in the qualifiers, it looked really unlikely for them to make it straight into the World Cup. But obviously that last game against Denmark where they won 4-2, that was a crazy, crazy match. They scored loads of goals. We saw that McTominay bicycle kick in the first few minutes of the game, and they ended up beating Denmark to that first place spot to make it directly into the World Cup. So I think this would be an interesting game for them to see how they play against an African team, which they don't play very often. And for Ivory Coast, once again, it's a good game for them to see how they play against European opposition, because obviously in the World Cup, they're going to be coming up against these European teams. I don't fully remember who's in the group with Ivory Coast. They have Ecuador, Germany, and Curacao. Yeah, so they're going to be coming up against a team like Germany, who are a very, very good team. So this would be very important to see how they play against a European team and whether or not they can win or whether they'll fall short. Obviously, in the last match they played in the AFCON, they lost 3-2 against Egypt, which wasn't the best result for Ivory Coast. I didn't think they were good in that game, but in other games in the AFCON, they were very, very good in the attack, which is very different to what we saw in the World Cup qualifiers. In the qualifiers, they were a very defensive team. They looked like one of the best defensive teams in the world. But in the AFCON, it's like they threw away their defense and they were all out attack. Players like Amad Diallo, players like Yan Diomande were performing incredibly in most of their games. So I think this will be a very important game to see how Ivory Coast perform against a European opposition. I know I already went through 10 games, but I'm going to give one extra because I just saw this game and I think this is a really interesting game. Austria against South Korea. Both of these teams are ranked around the same by FIFA. And if you look at their previous matches, both of them have gotten 3 wins, a draw, and a loss. And I think this is a really, really interesting game because if you look at a team like South Korea, we saw them lose 5-0 against Brazil in that friendly, but then they go ahead and get 3 good results. And if you look at a team like Austria, we see them beat San Marino 10-0, right? They get some good results in the qualifiers, but then they lose 1-0 against Romania. So I feel like both of these teams have been on very inconsistent form in recent games. And obviously Austria being managed by Ralf Rangnick, I feel like they have a very good team, but I also feel like some of their best players are aging players. And if you look at South Korea, I personally don't watch a lot of Asian football. So I think this would be a really good game to see how they pair up against a European team in Austria and see whether or not they can get a good result, a draw, maybe even a win, and whether or not Austria can get wins heading into the World Cup or whether their inconsistencies will continue and they'll fall short against a team like South Korea. And that's the end of this video. Those were my 10, I guess 11 games that are must-watch games in this March friendly window. These are games that you need to see, teams that you need to see heading into this World Cup to see whether or not these teams may have a good World Cup or whether or not they don't perform and they may have a poor World Cup. Let me know what games I missed out on. Let me know what games you guys are going to be watching. And obviously, I'm going to be going live on Thursday for that Italy against Northern Ireland playoff game. And I may be going live for a few of these other games as well. So remember to click on the notification bell so you get notified right when I go live. And obviously, if you enjoyed this video, remember to leave a like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff, and stay tuned for more videos.